It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Presented by Climate Power Education Fund. Does big oil care about our streets flooding or our home burning? Not according to an ExxonMobil top lobbyist.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. We were looking out for our shareholders.
They care about profits, not people. Learn more at polluters.exposed.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into this Thursday, March 11th edition of the Locked On Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host of the podcast, Ryan Latica, and I appreciate you tuning in with me once more here. We have a couple of games to recap since the last game that I summarized for you a couple days ago on Monday. The Rockies did earn a couple of wins over National League West opponents this week, starting out with an 11-4 victory over the Arizona Diamondbacks on Tuesday afternoon at Salt River Fields. And they triumphed over the San Diego Padres yesterday by a 7-5 final score in a 7-inning shortened game in that contest yesterday as well. I will let you kind of know how that all happened in today's episode, and I will also detail, I kind of want to go into depth a little bit about Austin Gomber as well. He's done a really great job overall so far this spring. I will get into Austin Gomber a little bit later on in the episode, as well as Trevor Story. There was an article published by Nick Groke in The Athletic a couple of days ago detailing kind of what a Trevor Story trade might look like. And I do have some thoughts on the whole Trevor Story situation that I want to get out for you guys as well. But first, I want to tell you this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. So the Rockies, as I mentioned, started out, well, I guess the first game that I need to recap for you on Tuesday against the Arizona Diamondbacks. It was an 11-4 victory for the Colorado Rockies. It was Chichi Gonzalez, the starting pitcher for the Rockies, against Luke Weaver for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And the Rockies, as the final score indicates, they really brought out the lumber for this game. The Rockies scored 2 in the top of the second, 2 in the top of the third, and then 1 run in each of the 4th, 5th, and 6th innings, capped off by a 4-run top of the 7th inning. The only 2 innings that the Rockies didn't score in this 8-inning shortened game was in the top of the 1st and then in the top of the 8th inning. So I will kind of just take you through a little bit what happened on the offensive side really quick. After the Rockies, they were only able to send 4 men to the plate in the top half of the first inning. Ryan McMahon walked, but Raimel Tapia grounded out to lead off the game. Trevor Story struck out after that McMahon 1-out walk, and then Charlie Blackmon grounded out on the first pitch of his at-bat. Or he popped out, to third base, and the Rockies were able to finally get on the scoreboard in the second inning. CJ Cron led off the inning with a double. He's been hitting the ball hard as of late, so certainly great to see from CJ Cron after maybe a little bit of a slow start offensively for the spring for CJ Cron. Josh Fuentes, he struck out right after CJ Cron hit that leadoff double, and then we saw Brendan Rodgers come up and hit his second home run of the spring. He just absolutely demolished that ball out to left field, totally squared up off of Luke Weaver, and the Rockies are making hard contact off of Luke Weaver all afternoon. So certainly great to see. But, for Brendan Rodgers, I mean, he finally looks healthy. He looks good at the plate, which is just phenomenal to see. And I tweeted this out after Brendan Rodgers hit that homer. I just desperately hope that we see Brendan Rodgers come into his own at the major league level this year. I really hope that we can finally see that because he deserves it. He finally, as I mentioned before on this podcast, he has a chance to take a starting role and really run with it and really prove what he can do this spring. So hopefully he does that. But Brendan Rodgers, 2-run homer in the top of the second. Those are the first 2 Rockies runs The Diamondbacks were able to respond in the bottom half of the frame on a solo shot by Carson Kelly out to left center field, his first homer of the spring. And the Rockies struck for 2 more in the top of the third, as I mentioned, after Raimel Tapia struck out to lead off the inning. Ryan McMahon, he hit his first homer of the spring. Trevor Story, he crushed his second homer of the spring. So back-to-back homers. And the Rockies then had 3 home runs, accounting for 4 total runs on the afternoon, entering the top half of the 4th inning, where Brendan Rodgers led off with more hard contact, his first double of the young spring slate. So Brendan Rodgers, 2 for 2 with a double and a homer. Can't ask for much more than that. Then Garrett Hampson, after the Brendan Rodgers double, he flew out to right center field. Dom Nunez came through with an RBI single. So that was the Rockies' 4th inning run. Then moving on to the top half of the 5th inning, CJ Cron came back up with 2 outs after Trevor Story flew out and Charlie Blackmon struck out. And CJ Cron, he got in on the home run party as well. He demolished a home run out to right center field. That extended the Rockies' lead to 6-1 in the top half of the 5th inning. Then in the top half of the 6th, as I mentioned, that was the 3rd consecutive inning where the Rockies plated 1 run. Garrett Hampson walked with 1 out. Dom Nunez singled him up to third base. And then Colton Welker, who I mentioned is one of the Rockies' top infield prospects, he came up as a pinch hitter in place of Raimel Tapia, and he came through with a little RBI single to give the Rockies their 7th run, and what would be their Rockies Tacos special if they were playing during the regular season. But the Rockies were then up 7-1 after that Colton Welker single. The D-backs were able to respond with 3 more in the bottom half of the 6th inning, and the Rockies answered right back with 4 more runs in the top half of the 7th. Greg Bird and Josh Fuentes both walked with 1 out. And then with 2 outs, Garrett Hampson came up. He singled in the Rockies' 8th run. Winton Bernard then came up. He came through with an RBI single. And Colton Welker again came up, and he reached on a fielding error by the Diamondbacks' left fielder, which allowed the 10th and 11th runs of the game to score for the Rockies. So certainly a really great convincing win for the Rockies on Tuesday. They hit 4 homers during that Tuesday affair at Salt River Fields, 3 off of Luke Weaver, who ended up allowing 4 runs on 5 hits in just 3 innings of work. He did allow 3 of those 4 homers. And on the other end, Chichi Gonzalez, he did pretty well in another spring outing. He only allowed the 1 run on 4 hits in 3 innings. The 1 run was that Carson Kelly home run right after Brendan Rodgers hit his in, I believe it was the top half of the 2nd inning. But then the Rockies bullpen came on and combined for 4 more innings of scoreless baseball. Actually, no, that's not even true. I was looking at the wrong thing. Jairo Diaz did come in and allow those three Diamondback runs in the bottom half of the 6th inning. But other than Jairo Diaz, I mean, you had Mujica, you had Robert Stevenson come in, Ben Bowden, he came in and pitched a scoreless, what would that have been, the bottom half of the 7th inning. Ben Bowden, I mean, he only allowed 1 hit. A hit and a walk. He struck out 2 guys. So overall, pretty good day for the Rockies pitching staff, save for Jairo Diaz, who certainly has had his struggles as of late. But that is what happened on Tuesday, 11-4 victory for the Colorado Rockies. And then yesterday, the Rockies had, I believe it was their first televised game from the Rockies' point of view on AT&T Sportsnet with Drew Goodman, and I believe it was Ryan Spielborgs, who was the color commentator yesterday. I was at work, so I wasn't totally able to tune into that game yesterday. But the Rockies, again, got off to a very quick start yesterday. The starting pitcher for the Rockies yesterday was Austin Gomber. And he did just another tremendous job yesterday. He was matched up against the San Diego Padres' top pitching prospect, Mackenzie Gore. And Mackenzie Gore, he ended up going 2 innings, allowing 2 runs on 4 hits yesterday. He struck out 4 guys. But the Rockies were able to get the scoring started in the bottom half of the 2nd inning. When Elias Diaz led off with a double. Greg Bird followed that up with a strikeout, and Brendan Rodgers grounded out. So a couple of quick outs after the leadoff double for Elias Diaz. You're wondering if the Rockies were going to let that go to waste. But Sam Hilliard came through with a sharp single that he just ripped right back up the middle. And then Connor Joe, he also came through with a single that Sam Hilliard single drove in the Rockies' first run. Played at Elias Diaz from second base. Then Connor Joe singled. Chris Owings followed with the third consecutive single to drive home the Rockies' second run, and that was the final hitter of the inning. As you know, with spring training, they're pretty much just kind of doing whatever they want just for development reasons. So the inning ended after that Chris Owings single, but the Rockies had taken a 2-0 lead. The Padres struck back in the top half of the fifth inning on an RBI single by Victor Caratini and a 2-run homer by Patrick Kivlahan, which plated Victor Caratini. So that gave the Padres a brief 3-2 lead. The Rockies struck back in the bottom half of the frame, though, on Ryan McMahon's second homer of the spring. So, I mean, we've seen the power really kind of show up for Ryan McMahon so far this spring, which has been really great to see. But really the key for Ryan McMahon is he's not striking out a whole lot so far this spring. I believe he only has 2 strikeouts up to this point. And for a guy who's really had issues with the strikeouts in the past, I mean, he struck out, at least 30% of the time in each of his last 2 major league seasons. So if Ryan McMahon can kind of tone that down a little bit, that'll be huge for this offense. So Ryan McMahon tied the game in the bottom half of the fifth inning with his second homer of the spring, and the Rockies, they were able to strike for 4 more in the bottom half of the sixth inning as well. Brendan Rodgers, he singled with 1 out. Sam Hilliard flew out right after the Brendan Rodgers single. So more 2-out magic for the Rockies happening in the bottom half of the sixth inning. Ryan Valade, he singled Brendan Rodgers up to third base. And then Colton Welker, he came through with a huge 3-run homer, to give the Rockies a 6-3 lead. That is Colton Welker's first homer of the spring. So he's obviously been hitting the ball well through the first, week and a half, 2 weeks of the spring. Jamison Hanna followed up the homer with a walk, and then Jonathan Daza, he came through with an RBI double as well to give the Rockies their 7th run of the afternoon. The Padres would strike for a couple more in the top half of the 7th inning, but the Rockies did go on to take that game by a 7-5 final score to move to 6-3 on the spring. So certainly great to see for the Rockies, coming up with a couple of convincing wins over divisional opponents, even if it is spring training. You'll take the wins as they come during spring training. So that's kind of what happened since I last recapped a game for you. It would have been the Rockies Monday afternoon game. But a couple of great wins over some National League West opponents. So now, before I continue on and get to Austin Gomber, I want to talk a little bit about Austin Gomber specifically in the second segment of this episode. I do want to tell you a little bit about RockAuto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of automotive makes and models, it is now impossible to stock all the parts you need in a traditional chain storefront. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the counterman orders the parts on his computer, choosing only the brand his warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to RockAuto.com at home and in your pocket. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpeting. Whether it's for your classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com.
David Harrison here, the Locked On Washington Football Team podcast, celebrating with you a 21-grain salute to a less boring sandwich thanks to Dave's Killer Bread. I don't know about you guys, but when I eat pizza, I eat it for the toppings, not the crust. And when I eat a sandwich, it's for what's inside the bread, not for the bread. But when I throw a sandwich on 21 whole grains and seeds, thin sliced bread from Dave's Killer Bread, it is the epitome of addition by subtraction. That thin sliced bread lets me focus on what's inside the sandwich, but also adds to the sandwich with killer taste, killer texture, killer nutrition, a subtle sweetness, and a seed-coated crust. Dave's Killer Bread is America's #1 organic bread for a reason. It tastes so stinking good. Dave's Killer Bread is made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients and is power-packed with whole grains, fiber, and protein. Visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your local grocery store.
Welcome back into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Rockies podcast, along with your host, Ryan Latica. So today I want to go a little bit in depth on Austin Gomber a little bit more. Obviously, he just had his third start of the spring yesterday, and he was very impressive. So I kind of want to break down his start a little bit as well. He allowed 3 hits and he walked 2 in 3 innings of work. So the base runners were certainly there against Gomber yesterday, but he didn't allow a run. I mean, he pitched his 3rd consecutive scoreless outing of the spring. He has yet to allow a run so far this spring, which is, I mean, obviously it's great. It's good for the narrative, as I tweeted out yesterday. But I mean, he struck out 5 guys yesterday. His curveball, it looked great. He also mixed in some good looking sliders and fastballs as well. But for Austin Gomber, he got at least 1 strikeout on all 3 of those pitches, on the curveball, on the slider, and on the fastball. So kind of how it happened yesterday, he allowed a leadoff single in the first inning to Jake Cronenworth, but then he induced a flyout and 2 force outs from Austin Nola, Ha-Seong Kim, and Tommy Pham. So the leadoff single in the first inning to Jake Cronenworth did not end up coming back to haunt him. Then in the second inning, he struck out Victor Caratini on a slider. He struck out Luis Campusano on a breaking ball that really was nowhere near the zone. The right-handed hitting Campusano, Gomber really kind of got him to flail at a breaking ball, far into the left-handed batter's box. So that just kind of shows he's got the deception working early on this spring. And then he also got Brian O'Grady on a 94 mile an hour fastball that was right kind of right at the level of the letters on his jersey. So 3 different pitches striking out 3 different Padres hitters in the second inning, struck out the side. Then in the third inning, he did run into a little bit of trouble. He struck out, and I apologize if I butcher his name, but Egi Rosario. It's spelled E-G-U-Y. So I apologize if I am butchering his name. But he struck him out to start the third on kind of what looked like a hard changeup or a slider in the dirt. Before he kind of ran into some trouble, he did allow 2 singles and 2 consecutive walks. And he did benefit from Elias Diaz. He thwarted a double steal attempt, getting the speedster Jorge Mateo at third base. But then he struck out Tommy Pham again on a curveball to end the threat. So that kind of put a bow on his 3 scoreless innings yesterday. As I mentioned, he did allow the 3 hits and 2 walks yesterday, but he did not allow a run, and 5 total strikeouts. So overall, I mean, he's now pitched 7 scoreless innings this spring. He has 8 strikeouts and he's allowed 5 hits and 2 walks. So overall, I mean, really, really great results from Austin Gomber to begin his first spring in a Rockies uniform. And Nick Groke tweeted yesterday after he finished up his 3 innings of work, he said there really was no open competition, but Austin Gomber is obviously one of the Rockies' best pitchers. His spot in the rotation will be 4th or 5th, probably wise to keep him apart from the other lefty, Kyle Freeland. So, I mean, as much as that Nolan Arenado trade sucked for the Rockies, it appears that it did bring back something that they were missing, that, kind of key 5th starter, so that they don't have to turn to Chichi Gonzalez or kind of, force Ryan Castellani or maybe Peter Lambert into a position that they're not quite ready for. I really kind of detailed the Ryan Castellani situation earlier this week. And how he probably needs a little bit more development time. Chichi Gonzalez, I've never been super high on him as well, just because of the lack of velocity, the lack of deception, and, the kind of walk rate that's been kind of out of control for Chichi Gonzalez the last couple of years. So, this does fill a hole for the Rockies in the rotation, as much as it sucks, having, to come by way of the Arenado trade, this does fill a hole for the Rockies. So what it's kind of looking like right now I would probably think it would be Derek Rodriguez, and Chichi Gonzalez will open the season in Albuquerque as depth options, which is fine, probably where they should be. It might actually be Rodriguez in Antonio Senzatella's spot to open the season, depending on how fast Antonio Senzatella can heal from a hamstring strain that he suffered on the 1st of March. So Senzatella has been out of action for the last week and a half or so. He did throw a light side session on Sunday without any issues, so that was good. Good to see. Hopefully he's on the mend there a little bit as well. But according to Nick Groke, it looks like it'll be Marquez, Freeland, Gray, Gomber, and Senza once everyone's healthy in the rotation. But I mean, overall, so far, great beginning to the spring for Austin Gomber. I mean, as I mentioned, he's pitched 7 scoreless innings this spring now, 8 strikeouts and only 5 hits and 2 walks. So, we'll have to keep looking for that to continue for Austin Gomber. Obviously, he's not going to give up, he's not going to go the entire season without giving up a run, but certainly great to see from Austin Gomber, as well as, as he, kind of settles into his new organization, and Rockies fans and the organization kind of try to heal from this Arenado trade. Certainly watching Austin Gomber succeed with his new team would certainly go a long way in helping that. So coming up here in the third segment, I do want to discuss a little bit about Trevor Story as well. Nick Groke and Jamie Newberg published a story Tuesday detailing kind of what a Trevor Story trade to the Texas Rangers could look like. But before I get there, I do want to tell you a little bit about the Built Bar. It's the best tasting protein bar available, and there are 18 amazing flavors out there, including caramel brownie, cherry barcia, apple almond crisp, and so much more, so you can be sure to find the best one for you. They even have a cookies and cream bar for you cookie lovers out there. It only has 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 5 grams of sugar. You also get a free cooler with any purchase while supplies last. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON20 to get 20% off your next order. And I also want to tell you a little bit about betonline.ag as well before I move on to this second segment. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but the NBA, college basketball, and the NHL are in full swing, and you can even bet on spring training games if that's your style. BetOnline even covers awards, TV shows, and reality TV, as well as all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up if you go and use that promo code LOCKEDON. So head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Welcome back into this Thursday, March 11th edition of the Locked On Rockies podcast, along with your host, Ryan Latica. So I just got done kind of detailing how Austin Gomber has looked through his third spring start, which went pretty well yesterday, all things considered. But now I kind of want to switch gears here a little bit and discuss something that was published, as I mentioned, in just before the break. It was a story published by Nick Groke and Jamie Newberg in The Athletic. It was a story detailing what a Trevor Story trade to the Texas Rangers could look like. And their reasoning, at least up front in the article, was that Trevor Story is from Texas, Texas native. Obviously the Rockies are always looking for him to do big things offensively whenever they make the trip down to Texas, and he usually comes through. He hit that big homer in Texas in the opening series last year. And he's always performed well offensively in Texas whenever the Rockies are down there. And obviously the Rangers wouldn't ever say no to, trying to work out a deal for Trevor Story. Who would? He's one of the top 2 shortstops in baseball up there, along with Francisco Lindor. So I won't go into specifics on the article just because it is, kind of like a paid subscription type article. And they probably wouldn't be too happy with me just kind of giving away the crux of the article for free. But essentially the Rockies are really at a crossroads with Trevor Story right now. As John Heyman tweeted last week, they apparently don't even have the budget to extend Trevor Story right now, even despite unloading Nolan Arenado's massive contract. So, in my opinion, they really just ought to rip the Band-Aid off right now and just trade him because, I don't, super love the idea of Jeff Bradich working out this trade after he messed up the Nolan situation so badly. But we're just kind of stuck with Bridich at this point. But if they really can't extend Trevor Story, if they really don't have the budget to extend Trevor Story, and not that Trevor Story would want to stick around in Colorado anyway, but trading him right now makes the most sense. I mean, he's a free agent after this season. This is his last year under team control. So the more you can give another team of his final year of team control, the better the return will be. And, Trevor Story has made no indications that he wants to stick around. The Rockies have, not really made any indications of trying to extend him on their end. So, it's you're just kind of left wondering, like, what are we even really doing right here? But luckily for us, we do have the Francisco Lindor trade earlier this offseason to use as kind of a benchmark. Excuse me. Francisco Lindor, he was in pretty much an identical spot as Trevor is now. Top 2 shortstop in baseball in his final year of team control, and the Cleveland Indians decided to unload him to the New York Mets. Cleveland traded Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco to the New York Mets in exchange for infielders Andres Jimenez, Ahmed Rosario, and a couple of prospects as well, right-handed pitcher Josh Wolf and an outfielder Isaiah Green. And Josh Wolf and Isaiah Green were the Mets' number 9 and 10 overall prospects, according to Anthony DiComo's January story right after the trade broke. But the Rockies' return for Trevor Story would likely not be as glamorous because, number one, it's Jeff Bridich. No explanation is really needed there. But two, as Nick Groke pointed out, they don't really have a Carlos Carrasco to include in that kind of a trade. They could send John Gray along with Trevor Story. He's also under the final year of team control. Or they could try to package Charlie Blackmon in a deal. Charlie Blackmon has 3 more years on his contract, including the 2021 season. He'll be paid $21 million this year and next year, and $13 million in 2023. So that would get the Rockies a little bit more financial relief as well. And it really sucks that, we even have to talk about that as a huge thing that teams are going for these days is financial relief. But that's just kind of where we are in today's Major League Baseball. But Colorado would likely at least be able to get, maybe one lower tier Major League ready player back for Trevor Story, maybe, kind of honestly at the same level as Austin Gomber. I mean, Gomber, he has showed promise at the Major League level. He's only been in the major leagues for, a season plus, including the 2020 season. He has showed promise, not overwhelming success at the major league level. But I mean, like with Austin Gomber so far, done pretty well during spring training. But that's kind of like what I would expect for the Rockies to get back for Trevor Story as well. Lower tier, major league ready player, maybe a mid-level prospect, maybe 2. That might be getting a little bit greedy if it's only Trevor Story in his last year of team control. You're not going to get a whole lot back for that, obviously. But beyond that, I wouldn't get my hopes up for any kind of grand return for Trevor Story, especially seeing how Jeff Bridich, mishandled the Arenado trade. But like I said earlier, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to hold on to him right now. If they really don't even have the budget to try to extend him, just honestly trade him now because his value is not going to get any better from here until the end of the season. And as I mentioned, and as we discussed with Miller Thomas yesterday, letting him walk for absolutely nothing at the end of the season wouldn't be great. Especially when he has, trade value right now. I mean, I'm sure he could help. There are a lot of teams out there he could really help who are in need of standout shortstops. And Trevor Story, I mean, he's at least the second best shortstop in baseball. MLB Network on their program Top 10 Shortstops right now, I believe that they actually mentioned Trevor Story, the Shredder did, as the top shortstop in baseball. You have to correct me if I'm wrong on that. I believe that that's true though. So I mean, he has trade value right now, but it's not going to get any higher from now till the end of the season. So as much as it sucks, I think that the Rockies really should be exploring trade options for Trevor Story. And, I know that Jeff Bridich and Dick Monfort really kind of stressed during that press conference after they traded Arenado that this is not a rebuild. They made that very clear. I don't know how you can really kind of sell that to your fans that it's not a rebuild, but they were adamant that it's not a rebuild. But I really think that, the Rockies need to go in that direction. Now, do I trust Jeff Bridich to lead any kind of rebuild? No, I don't. But it doesn't seem like that's going to change at any time soon. And, with the Rockies, they're not in any position to contend right now. I mean, that's just the simple fact. So with Trevor Story, I think that it is time for the Rockies to start exploring some trade options. Just because, his value is not going to get any higher from now till the end of the season. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to to hold on to him right now if they don't even have the budget to extend him right now. So that'll just about wrap up this edition of the Locked On Rockies podcast. I appreciate you tuning in with me once more. I don't want to talk your ear off for hours on end. But you can always get in touch with the show at LO Rockies on Twitter. You can also follow my personal Twitter account at Ryan Latica as well. Twitter is, again, the best place to reach me, as I've mentioned before. And yeah, I appreciate you listening in, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for more Rockies news and analysis. Take care, guys.
Preseason games don't count, but they do lend clues to who will be a contender. Here's what our local experts are locked on today. The New England Patriots opened up the NFL preseason with a 22-13 win at home, and the Pittsburgh Steelers got a 24-16 win over the Philadelphia Eagles. Our local expert in Steeltown, Christopher Carter, has his takeaways and analysis of the trade for linebacker Joe Schobert. Listen or watch Locked On Steelers on YouTube today. NFL Super Bowl odds are out from betonline.ag. The Kansas City Chiefs are the favorite, followed closely by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Today on the Locked On Chiefs podcast, it's game 1 of the preseason, but they are still looking for signs that this team is ready to win it all. It's official, Kawhi Leonard has re-signed with the Los Angeles Clippers 4 years, $176.3 million. But will he play next season? The answer is on the Locked On Today podcast. All the sports news you need in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On Today, wherever you get podcasts. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.